Billionaire's daughter hadn't gone outside in 5 weeks. What he saw the old maid doing shocked him. The silence inside the Sterling estate was not peaceful. It was heavy. It was a suffocating weight that pressed against the high ceilings, the imported Italian marble floors, and the soul of Arthur Sterling. For a man who controlled a multi-billion-dollar empire, who could move markets with a single phone call, the silence of his own home was the one thing he could not conquer. It had been 35 days. 35 days since the accident. 35 days since the funeral. And exactly 35 days since his 3-year-old daughter, Lily, had last felt the sun on her skin. Arthur adjusted his silk tie, staring at his reflection in the grand hallway mirror. He looked perfect on the outside, a bespoke navy suit tailored to the millimeter, hair swept back, jaw set in determination. But his eyes betrayed him. They were red-rimmed and hollow, the eyes of a man who hadn't slept in weeks. He checked his watch, 2:01 p.m. He had a board meeting in 40 minutes, a merger that would dominate the financial news for months. But he couldn't leave. Not yet. He needed to check on her. He walked softly toward the living room, his expensive leather shoes making no sound on the plush Persian rugs. He expected to find what he always found: the curtains drawn tight to block out the scary world, the television playing cartoons at low volume, and Lily curled up in the corner of the massive beige sofa, clutching her mother's old scarf, her blue eyes wide with a terror that no toddler should ever know. But the living room was empty. Arthur's heart skipped a beat. A cold spike of panic shot through his chest. "Lily?" he whispered, his voice cracking. He turned toward the kitchen. Empty. The library, empty. The panic began to rise, turning into a frantic energy. Where were they? He had hired the new maid, Martha, only 3 days ago. She was an elderly woman, much older than the elite, university-educated nannies he usually employed. He had almost fired her yesterday because she seemed too slow, moving with a deliberate, quiet pace that irritated his need for efficiency. Had she made a mistake? Had she left a door open? Arthur sprinted toward the rear of the house, toward the wall of floor-to-ceiling glass doors that looked out onto the acres of manicured gardens. He prepared himself for the worst. He prepared himself to hear screaming. He reached the glass doors and stopped dead in his tracks. His hand flew to his mouth, stifling a gasp that was half sob, half shock. The glass door was wide open. The afternoon breeze, carrying the scent of blooming jasmine and freshly cut grass, drifted into the sterile, air-conditioned air of the mansion. Arthur didn't move. He couldn't. He stood frozen, gripping the doorframe so hard his knuckles turned white. There, under the shade of the ancient oak tree, about 50 yards away, was a scene that looked like a hallucination. The golden afternoon sun filtered through the leaves, creating a dappled pattern on the green grass. A red and white checkered picnic blanket was spread out. Sitting on it was Martha. She wasn't wearing the stiff, formal grey uniform he insisted on. She had taken off her white apron and rolled up her sleeves. Her dark skin shone in the sunlight, and her white hair was pulled back in a practical bun. And opposite her, crawling on the grass, actually touching the dirt, was Lily. Arthur felt his knees go weak. For 5 weeks, Lily had screamed if anyone tried to take her past the threshold of the front door. She had developed a paralyzing fear of the outside, convinced that the world beyond the walls was where people disappeared. Yet here she was, in a light blue dress that matched the sky, chasing a colorful rubber ball. Martha rolled the ball gently. It didn't move fast. It rolled slowly, stopping just inches from Lily's hands. "Come on, little bird," Arthur heard Martha's voice carry on the wind. It was a rich, warm voice like honey and gravel. "You can get it. The grass won't bite. It's just tickling your toes." Lily giggled. The sound hit Arthur like a physical blow, a giggle. He hadn't heard that sound since before the funeral. It was a rusty, tentative sound. But it was there. Lily reached out, grabbed the ball and threw it back. Terribly, of course, because she was 3, but she threw it. She didn't look at the house. She didn't look for safety. She was looking at Martha. Arthur's vision blurred. Tears, hot and unbidden, spilled over his cheeks, dripping onto his expensive suit lapels. He watched as Martha leaned forward and whispered something to his daughter, and Lily threw her head back and laughed, a full-bellied sound that echoed through the garden. How had this old woman, with her slow gait and calloused hands, succeeded where the best child psychiatrists in the country had failed? How had she done in 3 days what Arthur couldn't do in 5 weeks with all his billions? He remembered the conversation he'd had with his personal assistant just 24 hours ago. "She's too old, sir," the assistant had said. "She sits around too much. She's not proactive. We should let her go and get the girl from the agency in London." Arthur had agreed. He had planned to fire Martha this evening after he returned from his meeting. He had thought her silence was laziness. He had thought her slowness was incompetence. He watched now as Martha reached into her pocket and pulled out a small red apple. She sliced a piece with a small pocket knife she kept in her apron, a violation of safety protocols, strictly speaking, and handed it to Lily. Lily took it and ate it, sitting directly on the grass, getting grass stains on her dress. Arthur realized he was holding his breath. He wanted to run out there and hug them both, but he was terrified that if he moved, he would break the spell. If he stepped out, the billionaire father would return, the reminder of the tragedy would return, and Lily might retreat back into her shell. So he stayed in the shadows of his own home, a prisoner of his grief, watching the freedom of his daughter. He watched the woman he planned to fire save his child's life. "Mr. Sterling." The voice of his driver startled him. Arthur spun around, wiping his eyes frantically. The driver was standing in the hallway, looking confused. "The car is ready, sir. The merger meeting—" Arthur looked back at the garden. He looked at the merger that would make him another $100 million. Then he looked at Lily, who was now trying to stand up, holding onto Martha's arm for balance. "Cancel it," Arthur whispered. "Sir?" The driver looked shocked. "The meeting, but the investors—" "I said cancel it," Arthur snapped, his voice echoing in the empty hall. He lowered his voice, trembling. "Tell them I have a family emergency. Tell them whatever you want. Just don't disturb me." The driver nodded slowly and retreated. Arthur turned back to the window. He needed to understand. He needed to know what magic Martha possessed. He pulled up a chair behind the heavy curtain, hidden from view, and sat down to watch the most important event of his life, his daughter playing with a ball. To understand the miracle that was happening in the garden, one had to understand the absolute hell of the last 35 days. The Sterling mansion, usually a place of order and elegance, had become a prison of high-pitched screams and silent despair. It started the day after the funeral. Arthur had tried to take Lily to the park, thinking the fresh air would do them both good. The moment the automatic front doors began to slide open, Lily had transformed. The sweet, gentle girl he knew vanished, replaced by a terrified creature. She had latched onto the doorframe, her tiny fingernails scratching the wood, screaming with a primal intensity that made the staff cover their ears. "No, no outside, no go, Mommy gone outside, no!" She associated the door with the departure of her mother, who had left one morning for a charity run and never came back. In Lily's 3-year-old mind, outside was a monster that swallowed people. Arthur, a man who solved problems with logic and resources, immediately deployed his arsenal. First came Dr. Evans, the most renowned child psychologist in the state. He charged $5,000 an hour. He arrived in a crisp suit, carrying puppets and flashcards. He sat in the living room with Lily, using big words and complex play therapy techniques. "We need to desensitize her to the threshold stimulus," Dr. Evans had explained to Arthur, using a laser pointer on a chart. "We will use exposure therapy." He tried to bribe Lily with an iPad to step onto the porch. Lily threw the iPad at his head. "Doctor, Evans lasted 2 days before declaring that Lily needed residential treatment and suggesting she be sent away to a clinic. Arthur fired him on the spot. Then came the parade of elite nannies. There was Miss Agatha from London, who had degrees in early childhood development and spoke 4 languages. She tried to be firm. "Now, Lily, a proper young lady must take her walk." She tried to pick Lily up and force her outside. Lily bit her hand so hard it drew blood. Miss Agatha resigned within the hour, calling the child feral. Then there was the young, energetic nanny from the agency in New York, Sarah. She tried to be Lily's best friend. She bought thousands of dollars worth of toys, electric cars, giant dollhouses, trampolines, and set them up in the garden, trying to lure Lily out with material things. Lily stood by the window, looking at the mountain of plastic with dead eyes, and closed the curtains. Sarah quit after a week, saying the house was too depressing. Arthur was running out of options. He was running out of hope. He found himself working later and later at the office, dreading the return home to see his daughter's pale, ghost-like face. He felt like a failure. He could buy islands, but he couldn't convince his daughter to walk 10 feet. And then Martha arrived. She wasn't from an agency. Arthur's personal chef had recommended her. "She's my aunt," the chef had said hesitantly. "She's not fancy. She's worked for regular families her whole life, but she raised 5 kids and 10 grandkids. She knows babies." Arthur was desperate. When Martha walked in for the interview, he almost laughed. She was 70 years old if she was a day. She wore orthopedic shoes and a simple dress that looked like it had been washed 1,000 times. She didn't bring a resume or a portfolio of references. She brought a bag of knitting and a small tin of homemade cookies. "Can you handle a difficult child?" Arthur had asked, skeptical. Martha had looked at him with eyes that were incredibly dark and incredibly deep. She didn't flinch at his wealth or his tone. "There are no difficult children, Mr. Sterling," she said softly. "Just children having a difficult time. I can handle that." Arthur hired her because he had no one else. But for the first 2 days, he regretted it. He watched her on the internal security cameras from his office. He expected to see her engaging Lily, playing games, using the techniques the other nannies had tried. Instead, he saw nothing. Martha would enter the room where Lily was hiding. She wouldn't say hello. She wouldn't try to hug her. She wouldn't hold up a toy. She would simply sit down on the floor a few feet away from Lily and take out her knitting. She would sit there for hours, just knitting, click-clack, click-clack. The rhythm was hypnotic. Occasionally, she would hum a low, wordless tune. Arthur, watching from his monitors, was furious. "I'm paying her to sit there," he fumed. He saw Lily watching the old woman suspiciously from behind the sofa. Martha didn't look back. She just knitted. On the second day, Arthur saw Lily creep out from behind the sofa. She sat about 5 feet away from Martha. Martha didn't look up. She just slid a ball of blue yarn across the floor. It rolled to Lily's feet. Lily picked it up. Martha kept knitting. She didn't cheer. She didn't say, "Good job." She just kept the rhythm. Safety, consistency, peace. Arthur hadn't understood it then. He saw a lazy old woman ignoring his daughter. He didn't see that Martha was building a bridge. He didn't see that the other nannies had been trying to pull Lily across the river while Martha was waiting for Lily to decide she wanted to swim. But now, sitting behind the curtain on the 3rd day, Arthur watched the culmination of that patience. He watched as the sun began to dip lower in the sky. In the garden, Martha slowly got to her knees. It was a struggle for her. He could see the grimace of arthritis in her face, but she didn't complain. She held out her hand to Lily. "Up we go, sweetheart," Martha said. "Time for juice." Lily stood up. She was dirty. Her knees were green with grass stains. Her hands were covered in dust. To Arthur, she had never looked more beautiful. But then the spell threatened to break. A loud noise, a landscaping truck backfiring on the road outside the gates, cracked through the air like a gunshot. Lily froze. Her eyes went wide. The fear returned instantly. She looked around wildly, realizing how far she was from the house. Her breathing hitched. The scream was coming. Arthur gripped the curtain, ready to sprint, ready to save her. But Martha didn't panic. She didn't grab Lily. She simply dropped down to Lily's eye level, ignoring the pain in her old knees. She didn't say, "It's okay." She didn't dismiss the fear. She began to clap her hands, a slow, rhythmic beat. Clap, clap, clap. And she started to sing, not a nursery rhyme, but an old, soulful song Arthur didn't recognize. "This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine." She kept her eyes locked on Lily's. She was an anchor in the storm. The panic in Lily's eyes wavered. She focused on the clapping. She focused on Martha's calm, wrinkled face. The scream died in her throat. Slowly, shakily, Lily brought her small hands together. Clap. She missed the rhythm, but she clapped. Martha smiled, a smile that crinkled her entire face. "That's it, baby. You got the rhythm. The noise is just noise. We are the music." Lily clapped again. The fear subsided, replaced by the game. Arthur slumped back in his chair behind the window, totally drained. He realized he was sweating. He had just witnessed a masterclass in humanity. He had thought money could fix his daughter, but money was cold. Money was impatient. What Lily needed was time, and someone who wasn't afraid to sit in the dirt with her. He looked at his phone. 5 missed calls from his board of directors. A text from his COO. "Where are you? Stock is dropping." Arthur turned the phone off. He watched as Martha and Lily began the slow walk back to the house. They weren't rushing. They stopped to look at a beetle. They stopped to look at a flower. Arthur stood up. He had to go down there. He had to face them. But more importantly, he knew that the hardest part wasn't over. His sister-in-law, Veronica, his late wife's sister, was scheduled to arrive for dinner tonight. Veronica, who blamed Arthur for her sister's death, who criticized every decision he made, and who believed that children should be seen and not heard, and certainly never dirty. If Veronica saw the billionaire heiress covered in mud, led by a common maid, there would be war. Arthur straightened his tie, though it felt pointless now. He walked to the kitchen door to welcome them in. As he opened it, he heard Lily's voice, clear and loud for the first time in 5 weeks. "Martha! Apple!" Arthur's heart soared. But as the kitchen door swung open, revealing the pristine white interior, he saw the mud on Lily's shoes about to touch the $1,000,000 marble. And for the first time in his life, Arthur Sterling hoped the mud would stain it forever. The kitchen of the Sterling mansion was a masterpiece of modern design, white Carrara marble, stainless steel appliances that cost more than most cars, and lighting fixtures that looked like floating sculptures. It was a room designed for magazine covers, not for living. But as the door swung open and Lily marched in, her sneakers caked in wet earth and her blue dress smeared with grass stains, the room suddenly felt like a home. Arthur stood by the island, his heart hammering against his ribs. He watched his daughter walk across the pristine white floor, leaving a trail of brown footprints with every step. A month ago, a stain on this floor would have resulted in a stern lecture to the cleaning staff. Today, Arthur looked at the mud and thought it was the most beautiful art he had ever seen. Lily didn't run to him. That was the dagger in his heart. She ran to the high chair. She climbed up by herself, something she had never done before, and banged her small hand on the tray. "Juice!" she commanded. It wasn't a whine, it was a demand. Martha followed her in, moving at her own slow, deliberate pace. She didn't look at Arthur immediately. She went to the sink, washed her hands thoroughly, and then opened the massive refrigerator. She poured a glass of fresh orange juice and set it down in front of Lily. Only then did she turn to the billionaire, standing in his ruined Italian suit. "Mr. Sterling," she said, her voice calm, showing zero surprise that the master of the house was standing in the kitchen in the middle of a workday. "We had a big day. We need a bath before dinner." Arthur nodded, his throat tight. He looked at Lily, who was gulping down the juice, her cheeks flushed with colour. She looked alive. The ghost that had haunted his house for 5 weeks was gone, replaced by a dirty, hungry toddler. "How?" Arthur choked out. One word. It was all he could manage. Martha wiped her hands on her apron and leaned back against the counter. She looked tired, her age showing in the stoop of her shoulders, but her eyes were sharp. "She wasn't afraid of the outside, sir," Martha said softly, so Lily wouldn't hear. "She was afraid of being left behind. The door took her mama away. She thought if she went through the door she would disappear too." Arthur gripped the edge of the marble island. "The doctors, they said it was agoraphobia. They talked about trauma response and chemical imbalances." "Doctors know books," Martha said, shrugging. "I know grief. Grief is heavy, Mr. Sterling. It's too heavy for a baby to carry. She just needed someone to carry it with her for a little while, to show her that she can go out and she can come back, that the coming back is the important part." Arthur looked at his daughter. He took a tentative step toward the high chair. "Hi, Lily," he whispered. Lily lowered the glass. She looked at her father. Her eyes flickered with uncertainty. For 5 weeks, Arthur had been a shadow, a sad, weeping statue who hovered in doorways. He hadn't been a father. He had been another ghost. "Daddy sad?" Lily asked. Her voice was small. Arthur felt a tear slide down his cheek. He quickly wiped it away. "No, sweetie. Daddy is happy. Look." He forced a smile. It felt foreign on his face. Lily studied him for a long moment, then turned back to Martha. "Cookie?" she asked the maid. The rejection stung, sharp and deep. Arthur flinched. He had given her everything, the trust fund, the house, the safety, but she looked to the woman who gave her cookies and sat in the dirt. Martha saw the pain in his face. She didn't offer pity. Instead, she offered instruction. She walked over to Arthur, stepping close to him, invading the personal space that no employee ever dared to cross. "She doesn't know you anymore, sir," Martha whispered harshly. "You've been mourning the wife you lost, and you forgot the daughter you still have. You stand up here," she gestured to his height, "like a skyscraper. To her, you're just another big, scary thing." What do I do?" Arthur pleaded. He was the CEO of Sterling Industries, but in this kitchen he was a lost child asking for directions. "Get low," Martha commanded. "Stop buying her things. Stop hovering. Get on the floor. Get dirty. If you want to be in her world, you have to go down to where she is." Before Arthur could respond, the digital clock on the oven beeped. 5:30 p.m. Arthur froze. The warmth of the moment evaporated. "Veronica," he muttered. Martha raised an eyebrow. "The aunt? She's coming for dinner. She's difficult." Arthur looked at Lily's mud-stained dress, then at the dirty floor. Panic flared in his chest. Veronica Sterling was a woman of ice and expectations. She blamed Arthur for the accident that killed her sister. She had been threatening to sue for custody, claiming Arthur was mentally unfit to raise Lily alone. If she saw this mess, if she saw the lack of discipline— "We need to clean her up," Arthur said, his voice rising in panic. "Now! Quickly! Veronica will be here in 20 minutes. The house! Look at the floor! We need the cleaning crew." He reached for Lily, moving too fast. "Come on, Lily, we have to change." Lily recoiled, sensing his anxiety. The happy child vanished. Her lip trembled. She dropped the cookie. Martha stepped between them. She put a hand on Arthur's chest, a shocking breach of protocol that stopped him cold. "Breathe, mister." "Sterling," Martha said firmly. "Let the woman come. Let her see a child who played. A clean child is a child who hasn't done anything. You want your daughter to be a statue or a girl? You don't understand, Arthur hissed. She wants to take her away. She looks for any excuse. She'll say I'm letting her live in squalor. Let her try, Martha said. And for a second, the old woman looked more powerful than any lawyer Arthur had ever hired. She turned to Lily. Come, little bird. Let's go wash the garden off. But we'll keep the fun, yes? Martha lifted Lily out of the chair. As she walked past Arthur, she paused. You have a choice tonight, sir. You can be the businessman who wants a perfect house, or the father who wants a happy daughter. You can't be both. Arthur stood alone in the kitchen as they left. He looked at the muddy footprints on the white marble. He heard the distant sound of the front gates opening. The buzzer on the wall intercom rang. Mr. Sterling, the security guard's voice crackled. Miss Veronica has arrived. Arthur stared at the mud. He took a deep breath. He didn't call the cleaning crew. He straightened his jacket, but he didn't wipe the dust from his own knees. The doorbell didn't just ring. It announced judgment. The chime echoed through the grand foyer, a sound that used to signal parties and laughter, but now signaled an inspection. Arthur opened the massive oak door himself. He didn't wait for the butler. He needed to face this head-on. Veronica stood on the porch like a queen, inspecting a peasant's hovel. She was beautiful, in a sharp, dangerous way. Her blonde hair was pulled back so tight it looked painful. Her Chanel suit was white, pure, aggressive white, and her eyes were sweeping the entryway for a single speck of dust before she even said hello. Arthur, she said. It wasn't a greeting. It was an accusation. She stepped inside, bypassing his attempt at a handshake. The scent of expensive, cold perfume filled the hallway, overpowering the smell of the garden that still lingered on Arthur's clothes. Veronica. You're early, Arthur said, closing the door. I wanted to see my niece before you put her to bed, she said, pulling off her leather gloves. She looked him up and down, her eyes narrowing as they landed on his suit pants. Good Lord, Arthur. Have you been rolling in the landscaping? You look disheveled. Are you drinking again? I was playing with Lily, Arthur said, the lie tasting like truth. He hadn't really played, but he had watched, and that felt closer than he had been in weeks. Playing? Veronica scoffed. She walked into the living room, her heels clicking sharply on the hardwood. Has she been outside, or is she still trapped in this mausoleum because you refuse to get her proper psychiatric care? She went out today, Arthur said, a spark of pride in his chest. She was in the garden for 2 hours. Veronica stopped. She turned slowly, her expression skeptical. Really? Finally. I suppose the specialist from Switzerland I recommended finally got through to her. No, Arthur said. It was Martha. Who? The nanny, the new maid. Veronica rolled her eyes. Oh, yes. The hire from, where was it? The classified ads? The one with no credentials. She walked to the fireplace and ran a finger along the mantelpiece, checking for dust. I told you, Arthur, you get what you pay for. A child of Lily's status needs a governess, not a babysitter. But I suppose you're trying to save money now that the stock is wobbling. Arthur clenched his jaw. She's not a babysitter, she's... Daddy! The voice came from the top of the stairs. Arthur and Veronica both looked up. Lily was standing on the landing. She had been bathed, her hair damp and curly. She was wearing fresh pajamas, pink ones with bunnies. But she wasn't alone. Martha was holding her hand. Martha was still in her uniform, which was now wrinkled and stained with grass and dirt. She hadn't had time to change because she had prioritized Lily. Her hair was a bit messy from the wind. Beside the pristine, white-clad Veronica, Martha looked like a beggar, Veronica's face twisted in disgust. "My God," she whispered. Lily saw her aunt and stiffened. The smile she had for her father vanished. Veronica was loud. Veronica grabbed her cheeks too hard. Veronica smelled like chemicals. "Lily, darling." Veronica pitched her voice into a fake high falsetto that made Arthur wince. She started up the stairs, arms wide. Come to Auntie V. Look at you. You simply must get a haircut. You look like a wild animal. Lily stepped back, pressing her body against Martha's leg. Martha didn't move away. She placed a protective hand on Lily's shoulder. Veronica stopped 3 steps up. Her eyes flashed from Lily to the hand on Lily's shoulder. Her gaze traveled up Martha's stained apron to her tired face and back to the hand. "Take your hands off my niece," Veronica snapped. Her voice dropped the falsetto instantly. It was ice cold. The hallway went silent. Martha didn't flinch. She kept her hand exactly where it was. "She's shy tonight, Ma'am. She's had a big day." "I don't care what kind of day she's had," Veronica hissed. "Look at you. You're filthy. You're tracking bacteria all over the child." "Arthur, is this acceptable to you? You let the help touch her looking like a vagrant." Arthur opened his mouth, but Veronica was faster. She marched up the remaining steps and reached for Lily, trying to pull her away from Martha. "Come here, Lily. Get away from that dirty woman." It happened in slow motion. Veronica grabbed Lily's arm. Her grip was firm, intended to assert dominance. Lily screamed. It wasn't the scream of fear from before. It was a scream of protest. "No!" Lily yanked her arm back with surprising strength. And then she did something that shocked everyone. She didn't run to her room. She didn't run to Arthur. She stepped in front of Martha. The tiny 3-year-old girl spread her arms wide, creating a barrier between the billionaire aunt and the elderly maid. Her face was red, her eyes furious. "No!" Lily yelled again, pointing a small finger at Veronica. "Bad!" Veronica froze, her mouth open in shock. She looked at the child, then at Arthur. Did she just call me bad? Did you teach her that?" She turned her rage on Martha. "You poisoned her mind. You uneducated, insolent—" "That is enough," Martha said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it had the weight of iron. She stepped gently around Lily, shielding the child with her own body again. "You can yell at me all you want, Mrs. Veronica. I am paid to take it. But you will not scare this child in her own home. Not tonight." Veronica's face turned purple. She spun around to face Arthur at the bottom of the stairs. "Arthur, did you hear that? She is defying me. She is defying family. I want her gone, now. Fire her immediately, or I swear to God, I will call the lawyers tonight and tell them you're letting a senile, dirty woman run this house while you have a breakdown. Fire her!" The air in the hallway was electric. The ultimatum hung there. Arthur looked up at the landing. He saw Veronica, the symbol of his world, wealth, image, perfection, and misery. He saw Martha, the symbol of everything he had neglected, patience, dirt, warmth, and love. And he saw Lily. His daughter was looking at him. She was holding onto Martha's apron with both hands, her knuckles white. She was looking at her father, waiting to see if he was going to be the man on the phone or the man on the floor. Arthur felt a strange sensation in his chest. It was the breaking of chains. He walked up the stairs, slowly, step by step. The sound of his footsteps was the only thing heard in the mansion. He reached the landing and stood between the two women. He looked at Veronica. "You're right, Veronica," he said softly. Veronica smirked, triumph in her eyes. "Good. Get her bag. I want her out of the gate in 5 minutes." "No," Arthur said. He turned to face his sister-in-law fully. "You're right that things need to change, but you're wrong about who is leaving." Veronica's smirk faltered. "Excuse me." Arthur gestured to the front door downstairs. "Get out of my house." Veronica laughed, a nervous, high-pitched sound. "Arthur, don't be ridiculous. You're tired. You don't know what you're saying. You need me. You need the family connection." "I have my family," Arthur said, looking at Lily. Then he looked at Martha. "And Martha is part of the solution. You are the problem. You bring the cold in here. Lily doesn't need cold. She needs warmth." You are choosing the maid," Veronica screeched. "Over me? Over your wife's sister?" "I am choosing my daughter," Arthur said, his voice rising, thundering for the first time in months. "Now, get out before I have security drag you out, and if you call the lawyers, tell them to call me. I have more money than God, Veronica, and I will spend every penny of it to keep you away from her if you ever try to scare her again." Veronica stared at him. She saw something in his eyes she hadn't seen in years, the ruthlessness that had built an empire, but this time it was fueled by love, not greed. She huffed, grabbed her purse, and stormed down the stairs. The front door slammed shut so hard the chandelier shook. Silence returned, but it wasn't heavy anymore. Arthur exhaled, his shoulders slumping. He felt exhausted, terrified, and exhilarated. He turned to Martha. He expected her to be triumphant. Instead, Martha was kneeling on the floor, hugging Lily, who was crying softly now that the adrenaline had faded. "It's okay, baby," Martha cooed. "The bad noise is gone." Arthur watched them. He knew this was the moment. He could walk away, go to his study and drink a scotch, or he could finish what he started in the kitchen. He looked at his suit, his $5,000 suit. He looked at the floor. Arthur Sterling, the billionaire, dropped to his knees. He didn't care about the creak in his joints. He didn't care about dignity. He crawled over to where Martha and Lily were huddled. Lily looked up, teary-eyed, surprised to see her father on the floor. "Daddy," she sniffled. Arthur didn't say anything. He just reached out a hand, palm up, resting it on the carpet, waiting, just like Martha had done with the ball, just like she had done with the yarn. He waited for his daughter to cross the river. The silence that filled the hallway after the front door slammed was not the heavy, suffocating silence of the last 5 weeks. It was a vibrating silence, the kind that comes after a thunderstorm breaks the heat. It was the air clearing. Arthur Sterling remained on his knees, the plush Persian runner, woven by hand in a distant country and costing more than Martha's entire life earnings, pressed against his shins. He didn't feel the fabric. He felt only the immense, terrifying distance between his hand and his daughter. It was only 2 feet, but it felt like an ocean. Lily stared at his hand. Her small chest was still heaving from the sobbing, a little hiccup escaping every few seconds. She looked at the large, manicured hand of her father, a hand that usually held pens, phones, and steering wheels, a hand that had been absent. Martha didn't speak. She didn't push Lily. She simply sat back on her heels, her breathing labored but steady, acting as the silent anchor in the turbulent sea of the hallway. She knew that this moment could not be forced. If Arthur lunged, he would lose. If he demanded, he would lose. He had to wait. Arthur's arm began to ache. He kept it steady. He looked at Lily, really looked at her, seeing the way her eyelashes clumped together with tears, the way her bottom lip jutted out just like her mother's used to. "I'm here, Lily," Arthur whispered, his voice cracking. It wasn't the voice of the CEO. It was the voice of a man who had been stripped down to his foundations. "Daddy is right here. I'm not going to the office. I'm not going to a meeting. I'm right here on the floor." Lily sniffled. She looked at Martha, checking for permission. Martha gave a microscopic nod, a warmth in her eyes that said, "It's safe." Lily took a step, then another. She reached out her small, sticky hand, still covered in the residue of the apple and the garden dirt, and placed it into Arthur's palm. The contact was electric. Arthur's fingers closed around hers, not tight but encompassing. He pulled her gently, and this time she didn't resist. She collapsed forward into him, burying her face in the expensive silk of his shirt. Arthur let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. He wrapped his arms around her tiny frame, lifting her off the floor and crushing her to his chest. He buried his face in her curly hair, smelling the baby shampoo and the faint, earthy scent of the garden. "I'm sorry," he wept, rocking back and forth on his knees. "I'm so sorry, baby girl. I'm sorry I left you alone. I'm sorry I was scared too." Lily didn't understand the words, but she understood the vibration of his chest. She understood the hold. She wrapped her little arms around his neck and squeezed. "Daddy home?" she asked, her voice muffled against his shoulder. "Yes," Arthur choked out. "Daddy is home. Daddy is really home." He stayed there for a long time, rocking her, letting the tears soak his shirt, washing away the stoic mask he had worn since the funeral. When he finally looked up, he saw Martha struggling to stand. Her knees were bad, he remembered. She had spent all day on the ground for his daughter, and he hadn't even offered her a chair. Arthur shifted, holding Lily on one hip, and reached out his free hand to the maid. "Let me help you," he said. Martha looked at the hand, a billionaire's hand, offering support to a servant. She smiled, a genuine, toothy smile that transformed her face. She took his hand. Her grip was strong, rough with calluses, warm and alive. Arthur pulled her up. "Thank you," Arthur said, looking her dead in the eye. "Thank you for saving her. Thank you for saving us." Martha smoothed her apron. "She saved herself, Mr. Sterling. Children are resilient. They just need to know the sun is still shining, even when the clouds are grey." She looked toward the kitchen. "Now, I believe there is a dinner to be made, although with Mrs. Veronica gone—" "No," Arthur interrupted. "No cooking tonight. You're done working for the day." Martha looked confused. "But the child must eat." "We will order pizza," Arthur declared. The words felt strange in his mouth. He hadn't eaten pizza in 5 years. "And we are not eating in the dining room. The table is too long. The chairs are too high." He looked at Lily. "Do you want to have a picnic?" Lily's eyes lit up. "Picnic?" "A floor picnic," Arthur said. "Right here in the living room. We'll watch cartoons, and we'll eat with our hands." An hour later, the Sterling mansion looked very different. The formal living room, usually a look-but-don't-touch zone, was in chaos. Pillows from the $10,000 sofa were thrown onto the rug. Several pizza boxes were open in the center. Arthur had taken off his suit jacket, loosened his tie, and rolled up his sleeves. He was sitting cross-legged on the floor, trying to balance a slice of pepperoni pizza, while Lily tried to feed a piece of crust to a very confused high-end robotic dog that Sarah, the previous nanny, had bought. Martha sat in an armchair nearby, a cup of tea in her hand, her feet resting on an ottoman. Arthur had insisted she sit. He had practically ordered her to relax. The atmosphere was light. The TV was playing a bright, noisy animation about singing animals. For the first time in 35 days, the house didn't feel like a museum of grief. It felt messy. It felt lived in. Arthur watched Lily laugh at the TV. He felt a profound sense of peace settle over him, but also a sharp clarity about the future. He turned to Martha. "I meant what I said to Veronica," Arthur said, his voice low so as not to disturb Lily. "I want you to stay, but not as a maid." Martha lowered her tea. "Sir? I don't need someone to clean the floors. I can hire a service for that. I don't need someone to cook fancy meals. I need—" Arthur struggled to find the word. "I need a grandmother. I need someone who knows how to sit in the dirt, someone who can teach me how to be a parent, because clearly I have no idea what I'm doing." Martha smiled softly. "You're doing fine, Mr. Sterling. You just needed to remember how to play." "I want to promote you," Arthur continued, his business brain finally working in tandem with his heart. "Head of household, or governess. I don't care about the title. But you run the schedule. You decide what Lily needs. If she wants to play in the mud, she plays in the mud. If she needs to skip a lesson to bake cookies, she bakes cookies. You have full authority, and I'm tripling your salary, effective immediately." Martha's eyes widened. "Mr. Sterling, that is not necessary. I do this because I love the little ones." "It is necessary," Arthur insisted. "You gave me back my life today. Money is the least I can give you. But there's a condition." Martha raised an eyebrow. "A condition? You have to teach me," Arthur said humbly. "Don't let me retreat. Don't let me go back to being just the man who pays the bills. If you see me drifting away, if you see me prioritizing the board members over her, you have my permission to scold me, just like you scolded Veronica." Martha let out a short, rich laugh. "Oh, I don't think you're ready for my scolding, Mr. Sterling, but I accept the deal." They shook hands again, sealing a contract that was worth more than the merger Arthur had skipped earlier that day. Epilogue. 3 months later, the spring had fully arrived, transforming the Sterling estate into a riot of colours. The tulips were blooming in bright reds and yellows, the oak trees were full of green leaves, and the air was sweet with pollen. Arthur Sterling sat on the stone patio, a laptop open on the table in front of him. He was on a video conference call with Tokyo. The investors were serious, discussing profit margins and quarterly projections. "Mr. Sterling," the Japanese executive said on the screen, "regarding the acquisition timeline, we were hoping to schedule a site visit next week." Arthur looked at the screen. Then he looked past the laptop, out into the garden. The garden had changed. The manicured, perfect lawn was now marred by a large, chaotic vegetable patch in the corner. There was a plastic slide that clashed with the architecture. There was a mud kitchen made of wooden pallets, and there was Lily. She was 4 now. She was wearing overalls and bright yellow rain boots, even though it wasn't raining. She was running in circles, chasing a butterfly, shrieking with pure, unadulterated joy. Sitting on a bench nearby was Martha. She wasn't wearing a uniform anymore. She wore a comfortable floral dress and a cardigan. She was shelling peas into a bowl, watching Lily with a hawk-like loving gaze. "Mr. Sterling?" the executive asked again. "Are you with us?" Arthur smiled at the camera. "I am, gentlemen, but I'm afraid the site visit next week won't work. I have a prior commitment." "A commitment? With another firm?" The executive looked worried. "No," Arthur said. "It's my daughter's birthday, and we are planting a strawberry patch. It requires my full attention." The executives looked stunned. The old Arthur Sterling would have flown to the moon for a deal. The new Arthur Sterling closed his laptop. "We can reschedule for the following week," Arthur said. "Good day, gentlemen." He shut the computer. He stood up, loosened his tie, and walked off the patio. He walked across the grass, feeling the earth beneath his shoes. Lily saw him coming and stopped running. "Daddy!" she yelled. "Look! Butterfly!" "I see it," Arthur called back. He didn't stop at the edge of the grass. He walked right into the middle of the yard. Lily ran to him, and he scooped her up, swinging her around until she was dizzy with laughter. When he put her down, she grabbed his hand and pulled him toward the vegetable patch. "Martha said strawberries need sun," Lily explained seriously, "and water, and love." "Is that so?" Arthur asked, looking over at Martha. "That's the recipe for everything that grows," Martha said, standing up and bringing the bowl of peas. "Strawberries, flowers, and children." Arthur looked at the 2 of them, the billionaire, the baby, and the maid. It was an unlikely family, stitched together by grief and healed by a rubber ball and an open door. He looked at the house. It was still a mansion. It was still impressive. But the curtains were open. The windows were letting the light in. The silence was gone. Arthur knelt down in the dirt, ruining another pair of trousers, and picked up a trowel. "Okay," he said to his daughter. "Show me what to do." As they dug into the earth together, the sun set over the estate, casting long golden shadows. The fear of the past was buried deep under the soil, and in its place, something new was finally beautifully beginning to grow. The end.